Thank you. All right. Let me just monitor the chat here. All right, great to be here. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm Eran, I'm a CTO and co-founder of Tabnine. Excited to share with you the stuff that we've been doing in Tabnine lately. Actually, it's going to be an interesting webinar for me because I'm going to share with you some of the recent stuff that we've been doing and stuff you'll be getting like a sneak preview of things that have not been released yet. I want to spend the majority of the time, our time together doing some live demonstrations and getting your suggestions and questions, ask questions. I'm monitoring the chat here. And as I'm doing the live demo, I'll be happy to work on examples from the audience. So again, thank you for joining. Let's dig in. So just to give you some context about Tabnine, Tabnine is really the originator of the AI coding assistant category. We're serving more than 1 million monthly active users on the platform now, supporting all major IDEs, all major programming languages, and really getting very wide adoption. This category of AI coding assistance is really going to change how software development is done. It's already doing that, but in 3 years, according to multiple sources, most of the developers in the world are going to be using AI assistants for doing their jobs. So the way I usually think about it is that, in 2-3 years, no code in the world is going to be created or maintained without the assistance of AI. So this is really the time to join the AI assistance revolution. So Tabnine is unique in that it is the AI assistant that you control. Tabnine respects your privacy. We never share your code with anyone else. You can run Tabnine in your VPC or on premise without sending code anywhere. Tabnine is protected. We train Tabnine only on permissively licensed open source code, meaning that we can guarantee that no IP that is dangerous in any way, a GPL licensed IP or anything else gets injected into your code base. And importantly, and what I'm going to talk about today mostly, Tabnine is personalized, meaning that Tabnine builds AI agents and code completion, code generation that are tailored to your world, to your organization, to your needs, and not generic suggestions based just on what we've seen or trained on in open source. Again, just to emphasize this point, Tabnine is really strong on security and compliance. We can deploy Tabnine anywhere and how you want, and deploy it on premise, in your VPC, or in our secure SaaS. We don't train on your code, no matter what tier you're on. Your code is never used to train Tabnine models. We work very hard to filter the licenses of code that we train on to make sure that the IP we provide our users is always pure. And we have all the security, safety, privacy features in place to make sure that your code is protected. And importantly, we don't retain any user information on the platform. So there's zero data retention in terms of where your code is stored. What I'd like to talk about today is the personalization inside Tabnine. And this is really something that is launching tomorrow. So you'll be getting a sneak preview of some of these features. And the way that we think about personalization in Tabnine is going through this curve, both by the value that they provide, but also kind of by the effort required from you, the customer. So on the left here is context. Tabnine is always aware of the code that you have in your IDE, in your project, on your machine. It contextualizes on that, and I'll demonstrate that. Second level is connection. You can connect Tabnine to external sources of information, both external repositories in your organization or other sources of information, such as documentation, Jira, Confluence, anything that is relevant context for Tabnine operation. Third one, which I will not be talking about today, is coaching, which is allowing you to provide explicit guidance to the code being generated by Tabnine, allowing you to control what kind of code gets generated, control kind of the guidelines, the style, best practices, make sure that the code that is generated or manipulated by Tabnine always follows what is it that you want it to be, right? So it's a way for you, the architect, the engineer manager, to control what gets generated. It's not enough for an AI assistant to just generate code. You want AI assistants to generate the code that you want and the code that your organization needs. Finally, in terms of personalization, is customization, creating custom model, fine-tuned model for your organization, for a code base, and I'll touch on that a little later. So I'm kind of cruising through the slides because I want to get to the demo part of the conversation today. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask them here on the chat. I have the chat open in front of me. So happy to take any questions and suggestions from the audience. All right, moving on. So in terms of personalization, again, AI assistants, you can think of them as contextualizing on different sources of information. It can go all the way from no context at all to kind of contextualize on the current file or in the current file to both sides, or all open files, all semantically relevant files, all related files or elements in the code base. That's kind of how we think about context in Tabnine, but can also go all the way to the right to what we call connection, which is connecting to organizational code bases or other non-code sources of information and using that to guide the AI. In terms of kind of technically, I assume this is a technical audience, so I want to share some of the technical details here. In terms of context, Tabnine is aware of your code, whatever is locally available in your IDE, all the code in your workspace, so all the open projects. And the way that this works is basically Tabnine uses retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, to pull in context from all your workspace. And whatever you ask Tabnine in the chat prompt gets augmented by this additional information, additional context, when it is being sent to the model, and it is being used as context to provide answers to you, the user, right? So Tabnine uses RAG to pull relevant pieces of information from the workspace, and I'll show you that in Tabnine chat, it actually gives you like a hint or gives you some idea of what sources or part of the sources that it has been using to answer your questions. In terms of connection, it works very similarly, but now RAG is not contextualized just on the local project. It can contextualize on the entire code base in your organization and other sources of information that I'm not showing here just for simplicity. So again, you may be interacting with Tabnine, providing some prompts. Tabnine uses retrieval augmented generation to pull in the relevant sources of information, both from your local project and from all code in the organization in order to answer the questions hitting the universal model. Finally, I mentioned customization. So this is the combination of everything that I've showed so far, but now we can also fine-tune, create a fine-tuned model for you based on your organization code, create a custom model, and now it's a combination really of retrieval augmented generation together with a custom fine-tuned model for your org or parts of your org, giving you like full customization and specialization, personalization of Tabnine to your world and to your universe. Technically, by the way, Tabnine uses LoRa, so it's a parameter efficient fine-tuning techniques for efficient fine-tuning that avoids catastrophic forgetting, even when we process large amounts of your code to customize Tabnine. So again, reiterating, really Tabnine provides code recommendations that are built around you, are personalized for you. And not just code recommendation, Tabnine supports the entire software development lifecycle, from creation of code through test generation, fixing problems, creating documentation, and all sorts of maintenance activities. So at this point, I'd like to jump to the demo. If you have any specific things that you'd like to would like to to know or like to see in the demo, please let me know, and I can try to cover that as I go through my demonstration here. So, all right, just one sec. Let me find my IDE here. And I'm going to share my IDE. All right, so you should be seeing my IDE now. This is Visual Studio Code, and I have Tabnine installed. You can install Tabnine as an extension. So if you look for Tabnine in the marketplace, you'll see Tabnine has been installed more than 7 million times. It's a very popular extension. You can see very good reviews, and you can install it yourself as well. You will get 90 days of Tabnine for free. And I'd like to start my demonstration by looking at code completion scenarios. So I'll just move some windows here, excuse me. Yeah. All right, so I'd like to start by talking about code completion. So I'm going to create a new class. I'll create it in code completion examples here. I'm going to create a new class here. Let's call it student.java. Right, and it's going to be an example for a student. And the basic usage of Tabnine is code completion. So I can get Tabnine to complete code by, for example, writing a comment. So I can say, give me a constructor with, no, I want first name. And you can see that Tabnine is already completing, like the gray stuff here that is completed in the comment is Tabnine. And I did not adopt it, so it went away. So let's say date of birth and not gender, and say email address. All right, then I write that, I hit enter, and now Tabnine basically completed the constructor signature for me first. But then if I hit another enter, what Tabnine would do is to complete actually the constructor body. So you can see it set all the fields here. These fields don't exist yet. So there are some kind of looks like errors, but I'm going to now create the fields. So you can see it's suggesting private. Should it be final? Yeah, we can make it final. First name, last name, date of birth, and email address. So I got all the fields completed by Tabnine by just hitting enter. And right now I can keep on going. And at this point, all that I'm doing really, guys, is like tabbing through Tabnine suggestions, not doing anything else. Right? So I'm just tabbing through, getting all the setters. Like, oh, I should not get setters actually because it's final, right? So forget the setters for now. Let's do something else. Let's do public boolean. Let's check if the email address is valid. So I can ask something like, is email valid? Let's do it like that. So it's asking if its address is not null and the address is empty, is not empty. Let's see if we can check something else. See, it completes like contains like @sign, and if we continue, connect a dot, which also sounds like a good thing. An email address less than 100. That's also kind of probably a good property to have. So let me take that. So you can see that at this point, acceleration is kind of what I got from Tabnine. I created this class by typing almost nothing, right? I just typed what I want from the constructor, and the rest was mostly tabbing through. So that was a very, very simple example. Let me save it for a second and close that and start going towards more complicated example, an example that uses context. What I showed here, Pesky, is not personalized, right? No, this is the constructor with these properties is something that is easy to learn from open source. And so I'd like to start building up to things that are more contextualized and show you how Tabnine uses context. All right, so I'm going to close this. Again, happy to answer any questions. I see that Peter is answering some questions on the chat. Thank you, Peter. But if you'd like to see certain things in the demo, please let me know. At this point, maybe I will also roll my poll here that you can answer. And I'm going to show some Java examples now, but I'm open to showing other languages if that is of interest. So I just deployed a poll that I hope we can see and answer. All right, so I'm going to go to another example here. Let's go to this app example. And what you see in this example, I already have a bunch of code written, and you will see that the style of code here is kind of particular. I have like variables that are always preceded by this underscore. For some reason, that's the style of code that the person who wrote the code wrote it in. So I have this very particular style, and I'm going to this point here. I'm going to ask Tabnine to create an administrator using interface. And what you'll see is that the code that got generated by Tabnine here is following the same style that has been introduced earlier in the file, right? So what Tabnine does, it contextualizes on everything that appears in this file and kind of learns that what you want as a user is to create the variable names in this particular style. And when it generated style and following the style that you wanted as a user. I'm going to keep on going. If you remember my slide on kind of how Tabnine contextualizes on things, you may remember that I started with no context at all, went to like talk about context that is from the current file, which is what we're seeing now. And now I'm going to start and develop going into more personalized and deeper notions of context inside Tabnine. And these are levels of personalization that are really launching tomorrow. So let me jump to another example here. And what's going on in this example is that I have some definition of a user builder and a user. So I have particular patterns in which I'm creating users. So for example, you will see here that I have this particular user pattern, user builder pattern, which is a Fluent API kind of thing that I'm doing with phone, with age, with address, et cetera, and then calling bill at the end. And so when I go to Tabnine, Tabnine knows how to follow these imports as context for what I just asked for. And when I ask Tabnine to create a new user, what you will see Tabnine doing, right, or supposed to do, is that it will create, what did I break? Let me see, what did I break? Yeah, so what it will do, it will create, something is stealing focus from my window, that's what's going on. All right, it will create the user using the user builder that I just imported here, right? So Tabnine is following imports, and by following imports, it knows that when I say create a new user, it should use the user builder from my import and not just create some generic user using a constructor that it has seen in open source. So that is actually a very deep notion of contextualization in Tabnine, because it not only follows, the currently open files or other open files in my IDE. I actually have no open files in my IDE right now. It knows how to follow imports and to use whatever was defined there in order to create the code, to generate the code for you. So again, we call that in Tabnine semantic memory, because it really follows the semantic definitions that have been imported here in order to generate the code for you. All right, I'm going to switch gears a bit here and going to switch to talk about Tabnine Chat. All I showed you so far was Tabnine doing code generation, code completion style, generating code in the IDE as you type. And I'd like to start talking about Tabnine Chat here. And Tabnine Chat, again, is something that is integrated in your IDE. It knows about your project, it knows your workspace, it knows all the concepts that exist here, and we can use it to answer questions about our projects and to perform operations on our project as well. And so we can do something like, let me turn off the workspace here. I'm going to ask Tabnine to do something, ask some question about the project here, something like, how do I call the Acme services layer? And what I just did by turning off workspace, I told Tabnine that I don't want the answers from chat to be aware of what is going on in my project, but I want actually to get generic answers based on what the model knows without any contextualization on my project. And you'll see that the response that I'm getting here is a generic one. It says like, oh, you should create this interface, and then you should implement the service, and then you should do all sorts of things to call the service layer. But these are really generic answers based on definitions from open source. They have nothing to do with my project. But if I go in Tabnine Chat and I kind of keep the workspace indicator on, meaning telling Tabnine, I want this question to be answered with my project taken into account. And let me ask the same question again. It was, how do I call the Acme services there? And now you will see that Tabnine is actually going to talk about a service that exists in my code, right? So it says you should create a REST client to call the Acme service layer using the client builder class, etc., etc. And it gives me an example. And it actually also gives me the references that it used to provide the answer. So it takes me to the right place in my code base, right? That tells me how to make a call to the Acme services layer and shows me how to do that by creating client builder with all the relevant parameters, including, the username, password, or whatever is required to successfully interact with the Acme services layer, again, based on what I already have in my project. And if you recall what I showed in the slide, I talked about Tabnine contextualizing on the project available in my IDE, in my workspace, but more generally also about Tabnine connecting to the organizational workspace. I will not be demonstrating it here, but it is available in private preview. And you can get the same behavior, asking questions not just on what's available in my local workspace on my machine, but asking questions to Tabnine Chat based on the entire organization code base. So I can do exactly the same. How do I call a microservice? Or how do I operate with a certain module and get answers that are based on the entire organizational code base, based on microservices defined elsewhere, etc. So this is very useful. All right. Switching gears to some more chat examples. Another thing that you can do with personalization is you can use mentions. So I can ask Tabnine to write new code, generate new code based on existing things in my code base. For example, I can ask Tabnine to, let's say, write a new controller in Spring Boot called card controller. And now what I can do, I can use mentions. So I can use the @ sign to mention other entities in my workspace, such as, maybe let's say hello controller. So I can pick another Spring Boot controller that already exists in my project, such as the hello controller, and ask the mind to write a new controller based on the old one, the existing one. And maybe we want to say something like that has an endpoint called, let's say, checkout, something like that. So what Tabnine does now, it goes and looks at my hello controller, that is something that already exists in my project, and creates a new controller for me called card controller. And you can see that it has the right annotations, it goes to the route that I ask it to be, to the endpoint that I asked. It manipulates the correct model attributes here. And again, to learn why it did that, you can look at what Tabnine used as the inspiration. You can see that Tabnine used exactly what I gave it as a mention here, which is the hello controller class, the controller that exists here. And basically, by mentioning it, what I did is I told Tabnine, write me a new card controller, but when you do that, don't do that out of thin air. Rather, use this hello controller that already exists in my project as a reference for the new code that you are generating. So again, what I like to impress on you here is that Tabnine contextualizes on my workspace. It knows the entities that exist now in my workspace. This is how I was able to mention another controller in my workspace and use that as a basis for generating new code. All right, so AI assistance is not just about generating code, it is about generating the right code, and the right code for you and for your organization. And what Tabnine does now, what I just showed you, are two things. One is being able to ask questions that are fully contextualized on the workspace or on more generally on the organization code. And the second functionality is explicit mentions, which allows you, the user, to help Tabnine focus on specific entities as reference or as indications or as source of inspiration when Tabnine performs its tasks. So yeah, I'd like to, again, maybe I'll stop here and see if there are any questions in the chat. All right, thank you, Peter, for fielding these. Let me see if there's anything here. All right. All right, so I saw the question about unit tests and test coverage. I'll show something to that effect in my demo as well. Let me first maybe go. Did I get answers to my poll? Hang on. No answers. Okay. Did you see my poll at all? Hopefully. Okay. All right, so I'm going to maybe switch to show some refactorings. Let me jump back to my earlier student example, which is this one. And if you remember, I had this checking for email here. And maybe one thing I can do is I can ask Tabnine to please refactor this function to check that email address only contains maybe the @ and dot and alphanumeric characters. So I'm not sure this would work actually, but we can try. Yeah, so you see that Tabnine basically returned an example that uses a regular expression here, and the regular expression checks that the email address starts with an alphanumeric character and then followed by an @ and then followed by other alphanumeric characters. So it seems about right. If I'm not sure what it does, I can maybe ask Tabnine, can you please explain this regex? So I'm conversationally chatting with Tabnine, and you will see that Tabnine will now explain what this regular expression is doing. And yeah, I think it is explaining actually the right thing. It's explaining also why this particular regular expression is the right way to check that the thing that you got is something of the form of alphanumeric at domain dot top level domain. So I think this is quite nice. Again, what I did is here, just to recap, I looked at this method here, is email valid. I asked them to refactor it to check some functional properties here that I want the email to only contain certain things. Tabnine generated code, checking that, actually expanding my check, not only checking that it's null and that it's not null and non-empty, but actually using a regular expression to check that the email has the right format. Then I asked Tabnine to explain what it did, or rather explain the regular expression, and Tabnine explained the regular expression, exactly the entire structure, including the partitioning to literals, the dot literal, and all the matches that are happening in this regular expression. So this is quite handy. All right, let me switch to maybe you asked about unit tests. Oh, okay, hang on. Walter asked something. Is it possible to validate the email using existing libraries? Okay, we can ask Tabnine, can you validate the email using some third-party library? Let's see what it says. New internet address, email address validate. So I don't know if Javax mail internet is actually correct or not. We can check that offline, but it is suggesting something using Java Mail API, which is maybe correct. I don't know. Are there other libraries that could do this? Let's see. We can keep on going and ask questions. So Apache Commons email, Java Mail API, Mailgun Java SDK, and Hazelcast Jet email. So, I don't know. Again, I'm not versed enough in checking email addresses to know whether these are correct or not, but at least the Apache Commons sounds plausible, as does the Java Mail API. So thank you for that question, Walter. It is generally a good idea to ask Tabnine to see if there is a library solution for whatever you're trying to do. Maybe it is better than checking, regenerating code. Some other thing that we could do here, by the way, we can look at this, maybe my original function, the simple one. Let's try something else. I can also trigger chat, not just by typing here. There are these little action buttons about the function. So I can ask, for example, Tabnine to generate documentation for this code. So you will see that Tabnine generates the Java doc for this code, and also kind of maybe in this case also improving the actual email validation to something that is better based on what we had in the previous conversation. All right, was based on, yeah. All right, let me, again, I can do like documentation for the whole thing as well. I can do, let's generate, generate documentation for the entire class. I can do that as well. Let's try that for a sec. All right, so you'll see that Tabnine generates like the Java doc documentation for the fields for all the operations here. Right? In this case, and if you like this documentation, like to insert it, the only thing that you need to do is hit insert here, and the whole thing gets inserted, and you're done with the documentation. All right, let me switch to maybe something else here. Let's go to like a person class, and let's do the following. First thing, this is like similar to my student example, but now it's a person class. I have set date of birth, which is doing all sorts of validations to make sure that the date of birth is in the right format, etc. And I'd like to actually start by asking Tabnine to explain this. You'll see that it says select a code, person class, that's the birth date. Code checks if the provided date is the correct format, throws an exception if it's not, etc., etc. So there's a bunch of stuff that's going on here. I can actually ask Tabnine to, can you please explain this step by step? All right, so I'm asking for a slightly more elaborate explanation. You'll see that it explains all the checks that I have in this code, like what is going on with the pattern around this D4, D2, D2, matching the year, checking that the month is in the right range, the days in the right range, etc., including the check that you have here that is quite elaborate, saying that if the month is February and the day is greater than 28, it's not a leap year. The standard check for checking the number of days in February. And now what I'd like to do after I've done this explanation, and again, see how nicely Tabnine explained this rather complicated code step by step, I can ask Tabnine to actually write tests for this function. And you will see that Tabnine is generating relatively sophisticated tests here. Right, so it will do something like if you put date of birth, that is the the first of the 13th month, it would complain that the month must be between 1 and 12. Similarly, for the day being 0, day being 32, 29th of February, 23, that's not a leap year, etc., etc. So you can see these are kind of pretty nice tests, and I can ask Tabnine to actually, sometimes Tabnine will put them in a class for me, but now it didn't, so I can ask Tabnine, can you please write a test class that incorporates these tests. Right, and now Tabnine takes all the tests that I had generated earlier and generates a test class for me that I can then take, copy, and create in my project and generate and actually run, and we can try and do that. So I can copy that, I can go to my unit test examples, I can create a new file, let's call it person test.java. And I can paste my copied code here with all the imports. And, I can then start and run these things, and my build fails, so because of something else. Okay, I will not get into, I don't have this installed at all. So I'll ignore that for now, but, Tabnine generated all the tests for me successfully, and had I configured my environment completely for this demo, that would have run as well. Just close this. All right, switching gears to some other examples. Let me see if there are some other questions here. Yeah, thank you, Peter, for filling questions. So let me see. Any questions for my poll? All right, so you want some Python examples? That's great. I'll share some Python examples soon, and maybe some JavaScript if we have time towards the end. Let me jump to some other examples here. So notably, I'd like to show something around code quality. So let me jump to my code quality example then. I have a very simple example here. One is printing Celsius, and actually let me show you the read file here. So read file uses a buffered reader. It is creating a string builder here, creating the buffered reader, reading the line, appending it to the buffered reader. Yeah, so that's a pretty simple loop. And let me do the following. Let me take this and ask Tabnine to optimize this code. And again, just to calibrate expectations, it's not that Tabnine can always optimize the code, or that Tabnine is it's not a compiler optimization tool. It will not always solve your problems, but sometimes it is a good idea to ask it how to optimize certain things. And in this case, what Tabnine did is uses a try with resource statement rather than the way I did that. And this kind of makes sure that buffered reader is closed properly even when there's an exception. So this is kind of a nice refactoring or a nice rewrite of the code as I wrote it. I think originally my problem here is probably not closing it with a finally, when an exception is thrown. So again, don't expect Tabnine to like super hyper optimize your code or find any problem that you have in it. But from time to time, it's good to consult with Tabnine to see that you understand your code and whether there are kind of simple improvements that you can put in to make sure that you're getting the best code quality. In the same kind of spirit, you can use Tabnine to also ask about vulnerabilities. So I can take this example that was taken from WebGoat, and I know, because that's why I picked it, that it has a SQL injection vulnerability. But rather than me guessing, I can go and ask Tabnine, starting a conversation here, can you identify any security vulnerability in this code? All right, so Tabnine says there's a potential SQL injection in the code in check user query in the register new user method. So we can go there while Tabnine is completing its stuff, and you can see it does check user query, and it is actually appending the username here without any sanitation to the query string, and then creating a statement, which I'm not no security expert and no Java expert, but even I know that this is a pretty bad idea, right? Because you execute something that you got, a string that is basically controllable by user input. So that's a bad idea. So what we can do here, there are other potential problems here, but I'd like to focus on the SQL injection. So I can basically ask Tabnine, maybe be more specific with the SQL injection vulnerability located. Right, and Tabnine basically shows me exactly where the vulnerability is. It says here's the way that you create the string here. It's not properly sanitized, allows an attacker to inject malicious SQL query to database. For example, it actually gives me the example of what happens when this variable is set to drop tables, which is the favorite examples from literature, right? Then basically, you basically run a query that will drop the user's table completely, right? And it also shows me how to fix this by using a prepared statement rather than a statement. So again, calibrating expectations, Tabnine is not a security tool. It does not replace security scanning tools, but it is a good assistance to maybe take a quick look at the code that you have, make sure that nothing that is really silly that is going on, right? So that's the use case. It's not don't try to find the most sneaky security vulnerabilities using Tabnine. It's not what it's intended for. All right, let me switch to maybe my last Java example, and I'll show some examples that are not Java. So let me jump to, what should I show next? Yeah, maybe I show like the iteration example here. Yeah. So I have, but I don't want this. Hang on. All right, so I have this test class here that has resources. I have a CSV with a list of devices here. And what I'd like to do with Tabnine is I'd like to create a parser, a CSV the parser that reads this and does some manipulation of that information. So I'm not going to type the prompt within the description of what I want because it's a long one. Rather, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Tabnine to follow this, which is write a Java class called CSV parser that parses the CSV file located in this path, ignores the first column of the heading, stores them in some way, and creates basically the values of each line. So I basically asked it to store it with the manufacturer name, display characteristics, interface type, and RRP. So, and then just prints this. So I'm gonna basically take this code and I'm going to create a new class here called, what was it, CSV parser Java. Oh, sorry, it's not in the right place. It should be here. CSV parser Java. And hopefully I do not get the name wrong. Let me see. That's right. So I got my CSV parser here, and if indeed I got that correctly, I can maybe even run this. Can I? Are you? Oh, sorry. Did I just regenerate it? All right. Apologies for that. So can I run this? Yeah, I can run it. All right. So let me run it and see that it does the right thing. What did it do? It did absolutely nothing. Why is that? Did I take the right code? Hang on, let me see what happened. No, I didn't want the test. I clicked generate test by accident. All right, so it didn't do exactly what I wanted because it did not print the values that I wanted. So let me try again. It did parse it, parse the file. Right, so it added it to the products, it returned the products. All right, so let's try. It didn't do what I wanted. So can you please add code that prints the products read from the file? Let's see if that would work. Yeah, so sometimes Tabnine will not do the things that you wanted, and you will have to negotiate with it in the chat a little bit. So let's see what happens now. Yeah, so it added some code for printing it, added some code for aggregating it by manufacturer, and all sorts of other things. All right, let's wait for it to finish. All right, so now let me take this entire code. Let me replace it with this one. And let me try to run this again. And did I take the code? Probably not, because I don't see it. Hang on. Right, that's better. Let me run that. All right, and now we did print the products actually aggregated by manufacturer. Yeah, that looks about right. All right, I'm gonna stop this example here. Just in terms of time, I want to make sure that we cover some other things here. Yeah, exactly. So let me stop sharing maybe this ID and share another ID so I can show some other examples. So where's the share button here? And stop sharing. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. If there are any questions, this is a good time to put them in the chat. And maybe I'm going to do something else here, which is first, let me share my IDE. All right, this another example of this time in React. So I'm going to run this example. This is the demo React application. You probably cannot see it. Actually, hold on. So this is the demo React app. You cannot see it unless I'm gonna stop sharing and start sharing the other one. So let me stop and share that screen for a second, just so you can see it. So basically what I have here in app is just the basic demo React application from React Starter. Again, I'm gonna stop sharing that, going back to my IDE. Yeah. In a second, going back to my IDE. Yes, where's the window? It's a bit clunky, apologies. So going here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to use Tabnine Chat. I'm going to ask Tabnine Chat to generate a particular application that I have the prompt for prepared earlier, which is create a trading screen using Ant Design. So I want a search field for ticker symbol, a buy button to buy stocks, a sell button, and field to enter the amount. And when the user pushes the buy button, I want to show some message about what was bought, and sell should show a similar message. So I got some application here. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to insert whatever Tabnine generated into the code here. And actually, you should know that I have like zero knowledge of React. So I never wrote any React in my life. And what is going on here is I'm going to switch to the application window. So I just took the code generated by Tabnine, pasted it into the app, and what I got is basically a React app here that I can use as a trading screen, so I can buy Tesla stocks here, or I can sell one Tesla stock, maybe buy 200 more, right? So kind of I got my trading screen, which is a very basic React application without knowing any React, just using Tabnine to generate that code. All right, so I think that was my JavaScript example that somebody asked for. So what happens if I write code in unsupported language? Will Tabnine try to help? So what kind of language do you have in mind? Right, so I'm not sure. Tabnine will try to help. It will not necessarily succeed in helping you for unsupported languages. So I will not have time to show Python, I think. Maybe assembler. Okay, assembler is good. Let's try assembler. I like assembler. So who asked about that? That's I think just for just for fun, in the last few minutes, I think we can try and do something like, please write x86 assembly. Assembly code that prints hello tab9. All right, so Christian, you will be happy to see that we can generate x86 assembly. I'm not sure I can actually read this, and we can actually keep doing that, but I'm not sure that's the most useful exercise. PLSQL, it will know some. It's not like a great PLSQL, I think, but again, I'm not even sure that I know how to ask like an intelligent question in PLSQL. Please try PLSQL code for querying the list of employees and picking the one who has been in the company for the longest time. All right, that looks like proper SQL code, not necessarily PL SQL. But anyway, I think this is for a different conversation. Happy to take that all these languages offline. So let me just finish off by going back to my slides. Which I have to find. All right, so you can get Tab9 either as a pro, which then as a pro account, you get AI code completion, just for you. If you're using Tab9 Enterprise, you're going to get AI-powered development platform, completely private, secure, and personalized for your business, so you can run it anywhere. You can get chat agents that are aware of your entire code base, models that follow standards and guideline, connection to Atlassian Jira Confluence that are used to inform the AI models, etc. All sorts of advanced admin tools as well. And really, you should remember that Tab9 is the AI coding assistant that you control. It gives you privacy, protects your code whenever train or anything from your code, gives you protection of your IP, never inject any bad code, bad IP into your code base, and it's completely personalized. So you can get the AI assistance that is the right one for you and for organization, following your kind of best practices, the organization best practices, and generating the code that you want and the code that you need, and not just generic code, as we have learned from the open source. So that's it. That's all I've had for today. If there are additional questions, I'm happy to take them in the couple of minutes that we have left. All right, if there aren't any further questions, I think we can close this now. Thank you.